2414 is a podcast about finding hope and common ground through casual conversation. Like the friends on the road in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 24, verse 14, we want to walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. Thanks for walking with us.
Well, hello. Welcome to 2414. Thanks for laughing at me, Pastor Dan.
Good morning.
This is 2414, a podcast about finding hope and common ground through casual conversation. And it's just a show about some people talking about random things. This random thing we're talking about today, kind of starting a new series, but also introducing new people, is the series Vocations.
Vocations.
Vocations. Vocation is a fancy word. How would you describe it, Pastor Dan?
It means calling or callings.
Calling, what you're called to do in life. That doesn't necessarily mean a job, but it could just mean what you're primarily doing most of the time.
Yeah, it's
in this world.
Yeah, we'll unpack it, but it's kind of spheres or circles of relationship. Where have you been placed in the world? As Christians, we'd say to serve others. Who are the people that God has called you to love well in a variety of ways? So we'll talk about some of those different areas or arenas of calling and vocation.
Yeah, I think you put that very well. Thanks. But today joining us, we have Pastor David LaFore.
Hello. Hello. Well, there he is. David, you want to wave at the camera so people can see that lovely face that goes with the awesome beard?
There it is.
I'll give a very...
The grain beard, but awesome.
A very quick introduction, I guess, for people who don't know. Pastor David LaFore is St. Luke's new associate pastor.
Yeah, he was installed on November the 13th, the year of our Lord 2022, coming to us from Mount Angel, Oregon, outside of Portland, serving God's people down there at Trinity Lutheran Church.
Yeah, Trinity Lutheran out in Willamette Valley, one of the oldest churches in the Missouri Synod in Northwest District. So,
pretty cool.
Where is that in, if you had to describe it on a map of Oregon?
It's about an hour southeast of Portland.
Okay.
Do you know where the Woodburn outlets are?
Nope.
On I-5?
No.
Okay, well, that's everyone in Oregon. Oh, yeah, the Woodburn outlets. Oh, yeah. It's kind of a major place.
Okay.
It's the northern end of the Willamette Valley, more towards the Cascades and towards the coast.
Okay.
And, yeah, so near Salem. Salem was the city I went to a lot, spent a lot of time in there.
Okay.
Really got to know Salem well my last year.
Salem's the capital, right?
Salem's the capital of Oregon, yes. Yeah.
Well done, Shane. Way to go.
Stud in geography, I guess.
Yeah. So as we get into the topic at hand today, as always, we want to share some lows and highs. And as we start to talk about vocations and callings, I'm curious what each of you guys wanted to be when you were a kid. Like when I grew up, I'm going to be, or I want to be. If you recall, and maybe that changed at different times, but what is one of the earliest when I grew up I'm going to be? So Shane, you want to start us off? Lows, highs. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I can try, but yes. All right. So yes, highs, lows. I guess keep it brief, more or less. So lows and highs kind of go together. It's bittersweet, so it all kind of meshes to one. So highs. The past 3 weeks have been special services at St. Luke's. So 3 weeks ago, we had Reformation Sunday. I tried to make a big thing of that. 2 weeks ago was All Saints Day. There were a lot of moving pieces for that service. And this Sunday was the installation service for you. And all in between that was theater things going on, the theater show. The Music Man just wrapped it up. 7 shows in total. And Tech Week in there too. And so a lot of things going on, but all exciting things. So very happy. All those things I think went well and can celebrate that. But the low of that was just that it was very busy. Life was very busy the past 3 weeks. But I survived and I think everything was awesome. And so I don't know. Praise God. Woo. Yeah. It's all done. And I'm also just excited now that those things are done, kind of got a moment of freedom, not freedom, but like routine back. That's what I'm looking for. Got some routine going back into kind of normal flow of life. So
nice.
It's exciting. And so
what did you want to be when I grew up? What did you want to be when you were a kid and thought about growing up and being an adult?
Yes.
And having a job, maybe?
I don't think I had like a single thing I was like super passionate about.
Okay.
Some like random things that I guess like crossed my mind though when I was a kid.
Like a dinosaur?
Well, not like that.
Okay.
Young. I don't know. I think the earliest one I could remember was like a construction worker because I loved Legos and I loved building things.
You
So
look good in overalls and a yellow hat?
yeah. So like if you told me as a kid like I could work building things, like that was so cool.
Yeah.
So, and like Tonka trucks and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like a little later, I think a video game designer or whatever was one of them too. I don't know what the word is. Insectologist. I don't know what the
Entomologist.
Entomologist. Thank you. But yeah, so the person who studies insects crossed my mind too. And I was like, because I was very fascinated by insects. I never was like grossed out by them. Like I would just scoop up grasshoppers all the time and hold any insect I could find in my hands. Now I'm older. I'd never do that. But as a kid, I loved it.
Long-time listeners will know that Shane's not a fan of the arachnids.
No,
Yeah.
evil spawns of
Did
evil.
you have lightning bugs where you lived growing up?
Yes. Yeah. So we used to
Mythical
always
creatures.
catch them. It was fun because
Yeah.
like you'd see 'em, like you see the lightning bug like flash and you try to find that one in the dark and you're like, oh, there it is now, and you try to catch it. They're fun creatures. So I don't know, some brief.
Okay. So
Early
Bob the
callings.
Builder, entomologist, and video game designer.
Yeah.
Okay. And here you are. You're
brief ones.
playing your guitar, singing your songs.
Yeah. And then musician came out of that.
Okay.
Lord knows. So
All right.
yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
We'll give our guest a moment here to think as well.
Yeah.
So this is Dan speaking. Hello, welcome, David.
Hey.
Welcome, Shane. Viewers, listeners, hello as well. I got lots of lows and highs. Lows. One low is I've had a minimal amount of running in my life recently. So which I guess that would be for some people that's a low on the opposite side. Like I've been running with some people's lows, I suppose.
What is a minimal amount?
So I volunteer with a local track club, Federal Way Track Club, and it's awesome. And so we have practice Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then meets on Saturday. So those 4 days. So I'm running with kids, and that's hard work. We did 5 or so miles last night in the dark with headlights on. It was cold, but I'm not running outside of that. So I'm only putting in as much mileage as like the 8-year-old I'm training with. So it's less impressive when it's like, oh, I'm running as much as this 8-year-old.
So odds are 8-year-olds aren't running like 10 miles.
Most of them aren't. No, they shouldn't be.
8-year-old's probably running more than me.
Yeah, he's
So
some of these kids are.
I don't think I'd qualify for regionals.
Yeah, no, I guess some of these kids are.
Don't let
awesome.
your dreams be dreams. Come on.
No, that's fine. That one could stay a nightmare.
Is that our new tagline? Don't let your dreams be dreams.
That's a Shia LaBeouf quote, actually.
Oh, okay. I never.
Oh, boy.
That's next week's episode. So yeah, one low is just not as much running as I would like, but that's okay. Another low is realizing how inadequate I am to own a home and like take care of things. So I can do certain things just fine, but I was sitting in one of our rooms last night or this morning, and there's a skylight way up above through this little shaft that goes up to the roof, and there's a cold breeze coming, and as far as I can tell, that window up there is closed. So I'm out of options. Like winter's coming, and there's a cold breeze now.
It's good.
I guess there's nothing you can do about that. So I this morning I'm sipping on my coffee, and I tell my wife, I go, I think we should probably just keep that door closed, till winter's over, because there's a cold breeze. And so
It's a summer room.
yeah, I don't know what to do about that. So it's probably a very minimal repair, or maybe it's not. Maybe I gotta cut out a chunk of my roof and rebuild it, or maybe it's just a little dab of caulk. I don't know, and I just feel like I'm not a man and have no idea how to handle these things.
Just move.
Yeah.
Start over.
Yeah, so that's my other low. Highs, a whole bunch. I've shared on the several previous episodes of how routines haven't been where I want them to be, and I feel like I'm getting a grip on that. So spending my mornings and evenings, that free disposable time, a little more intentionally. Pastor David being here is a great high. I'm not just saying that because he's at the table. Really, I'm excited. And then the other big one is my wife and I went to a marriage retreat conference last weekend, I guess. Yeah. So that was, every 17 years we want to invest a little bit in our marriage. Hopefully we do it far sooner than that next time. But it was a good time to connect, have conversation, be with friends, see a city where we lived before. So marriage retreat was a really, really good thing for us. When I was a kid, wanted to grow up, first thing I remember wanting to be was a hockey player. So grew up in St. Louis, watching St. Louis Blues. And so I would get home from school and train. Like I was playing hockey in the street till it was dark, and it felt like I was on a path to becoming a professional hockey player.
School, what year? Or like how age range were you on this?
Probably from the time I was about 4 or 5 is when it seems like.
Okay.
Until, I was maybe 16 or 17 and realized I wasn't going to get any bigger. Like I just stopped growing, and all of a sudden I was like, this isn't going to work. So I want to be a hockey player. Even when we got to middle school, I started taking a foreign language. I'm going to take French because a lot of hockey players are from Canada, and I gotta practice my French. So I took 6 years of French.
Is that why you started learning French?
Yeah, I gotta know the language of my people.
I thought it was just because you like the country.
Well, I think it's a pretty cool country too. I could sing the national anthem if you want me to.
No.
No? Okay, that's pretty quick nose from both of you. All right. Well, we'll move on from there.
So I'm actually French. I feel like I'm going to speak on behalf of my people.
Okay.
Say we're good.
Okay.
We're good. I think so.
All right. Well, I'll
Just take it into consideration.
Yeah. So hockey player was the first thing, and then I wanted to be a lawyer because I like to argue with people. And so I took the pugilism of hockey and the argumentativeness of lawyer, and I became a pastor.
Oh, yeah.
So here we are.
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
So Reverend David Charles LaFore, welcome to the table. Welcome back to Federal Way. Welcome to staff. Highs and lows from your last 20 minutes, day, week.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think I shared with you guys earlier, it's just been drinking from fire hose pretty much lately. It's, coming from a church of 25 to 30 people on an average Sunday when the one full-time staff member was me. And, everything kind of just happened relationally, which I knew was not the way that organizations should necessarily run. But, weirdly, they don't teach you a lot of organizational management at seminary. I mean, maybe some of that would be wasted, but some of it would be good.
Yeah.
So to go in from that to, nope, this is a system that's bigger than me. Here's this. And it's good. I need to hear it all now, because I'm going to need to hear it again. And the more times I hear it, the less I'll need to hear it, which will be fantastic. So yeah, definitely more overwhelming than I suspected it would be. But I also, allowed that this first couple weeks are just going to be like trying to stay afloat.
Yeah. Which is probably true in a lot of, like if you have a new job of anything, you go home that first week, you're like, I shouldn't be doing this. I can't do this. Like they got the wrong person. I'm never going to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. But some of the highs, been able to have Greta here, my girlfriend, this weekend, where she was just really supportive and saying what I needed to hear. So that was good. Kind of going through this in a relationship was good for both of us. I got to spend the last week out in Spokane. That's where my father owns some property. That's where Greta works. And so that was great. Really kind of like Spokane a lot. It's a pretty cool city. Yeah. So the more time I've spent there, it's like, wow, this is a cool spot. And then as Sunday, got some time to myself for the first time in a while, just to be completely on my own and not scheduled, and stopping by the North 47.
Yes. Local brewery here in Northeast Tacoma.
Browns Point, and talking to a guy from Wisconsin. Named Paul, so hopefully I'm not, revealing any identities. Paul from Oshkosh. I think there has to be more than one, right?
Probably so. Although probably not too many Pauls from Oshkosh in Northeast Tacoma.
That's true. Paul, if you're listening.
Thanks for listening, Paul. Yeah.
And then
next one's on Pastor David.
Yeah, going kayaking out at Browns Point, and just getting out in the water and be like, okay, nope, I'm going to have routines of doing the things I want to do again. Just for the next little while, it's going to be a little bit of everything going on. As far as what I wanted to be as a kid, as a child, first Jurassic Park came out when I was like, I don't know, 6 to 8. I don't remember what year it came out. I was born in 1990, so it came out when I was very impressionable. I watched that movie so much, I think I wore out the VHS tape. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I'm not sure if I was connecting that the dinosaurs.
I think you mean paleontologist.
Yeah, no, see, you're correct.
Because I have archaeologist friends who are like, we don't dig up dinosaurs.
Yeah,
That's not what we do.
I know. But as a child, I used the term archaeologist.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I wanted to dig.
Doesn't know.
And but really what I wanted was to be with live dinosaurs. I didn't really get the idea of Jurassic Park, which is like, this is actually a terrible idea.
So you wanted to find the mosquitoes and the amber and...
Yeah, I wanted to make Jurassic Park a reality, which again, I completely failed to understand the morality of the whole story of Jurassic Park.
What could go wrong?
To be fair, I think the people who made the new movies of Jurassic Park have also failed to completely understand the morality of Jurassic Park. So, I was 8, so I have more excuses.
Yeah.
After that, I really got into the Blue Angels, so I wanted to be a pilot in the Navy.
Okay.
And this is going to sound really awful, but I realized at one point in middle school, that's a lot of work. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. I do a lot of stuff. Well, not that. Oh yeah. I mean, of course, it's not like the current job I'm in is like a lack of work. But I really just, particularly it was the focus on the math, the engineering. I just knew that wasn't, I didn't think that the job was going to keep enough of my interest to get me to want to do the things that I really did not like. And yeah, so that was, I don't know if there's anything kind of in between. It was really just archaeologist, really truly paleontologist, but don't tell.
Yeah, I'll keep it.
I didn't know those terms.
My friend Amanda, if you're listening, we acknowledge the difference.
This is completely. It would have been fun though. I would have. If knowing me, if I would have gone into college and signed up to be an archaeologist, still not understanding the difference of those words, I would have just stuck with it. It's like, okay,
I'm in too deep at this point.
Man, would it be real embarrassing if I said that this is not the program? I guess I'm just going to live the rest of my life digging up pottery when I really wanted to see dinosaurs.
Raising your hand in class, you're like, when did the dinosaurs come?
Oh man, yeah. So, I mean, this is cool and all.
I love a good pop shirt as much as the next guy.
I'm really into this Nez Pierce stuff, but like dinosaurs.
Does it ever? Do you guys ever come across them?
Awesome.
Yeah,
and then you became pastor.
Yes.
So thanks for sharing. That's all. I didn't know either of those about either of you guys' profession. Childhood aspirations. Thanks for sharing.
Big dreams.
So this several weeks we're going to be talking about vocations, callings. I think in our context we typically hear vocation as like a job, and maybe even like a more blue collar job. Like you dropped out of high school, or you didn't go to college, so you went to like a vocational tech school, which meant like we put tools in your hands, so you learned how to do something. But that's which, by the way, is a great calling, great thing to do. That's not really what we mean here. I'm taking a lot of this, for me, one of the formative thinkers and writers on this is a guy named Gene Edward Veith Jr. He wrote a book called God at Work, kind of unpacking Martin Luther's theology of vocation and the idea that behind the calling is the one who calls us. So we are called to serve, and kind of put in positions to love our neighbor and serve others. And as we do so, one of Martin Luther's sort of insights from Scripture is that it's not just Shane or David or Dan working, but God is at work. God is at work through the mother who's nursing her child to provide for that kid's nourishment. God is at work through the farmer laboring so that we would have our daily bread. God's at work through the truck driver and the guy setting up the orange cones on the side of the road so that the bread can get to the grocery store so that we can have our daily bread. So in all of our different spheres, circles of influence and loving our neighbor, we are called to serve, and God is at work. And one of Luther's phrases is that these different callings and vocations are masks of God. So God's working in the world, but sometimes he wears a Shane Wilter mask. Sometimes he wears a trash man mask. Sometimes he wears a senator mask. And that through these callings, God's bringing about his good providential kind of will on the earth, which is a really beautiful thing. It gives value to what we're doing. So some of the main areas where we have callings and vocations, there's sort of what people do professionally for pay, and maybe in retirement, there's what they do for volunteering. We have our vocations or callings as workers. We also have vocations in family, son, husband, uncle, brother, nephew, wife, sister, niece, aunt, grandma, etc. We have friends that we have kind of callings to that are not as formalized, but I have these people in my life that I get to love and bless. We have callings as citizens of a country and as a local community, that these are our neighbors in the commonwealth or the state or the place where we get to live. And we have callings in a church. So today we're talking with Pastor David about his professional vocation, professional calling. I usually use pastor. What do you... if you're describing what you do, if you meet somebody who's not a parishioner at our church, if you're at North 47 Brewery or on the airplane, and somebody says, "What do you do?" How do you describe it?
Gotta be honest, I always kind of like
hem and haw around
that
it.
Question doesn't come up.
This is going to get awkward.
It completely changes the attitude of the conversation, especially when they don't know me. When they know me better, it's less of a deal. They sometimes are surprised, but. I guess really it's, I usually just say pastor.
Yeah.
I've used preacher. I've used minister. I've used church worker. Oh, I work at a church.
Yeah.
I think, when I was in Salem and, the people I was exercising with, I was in a exercise group, and, they eventually got around to ask me what I did for a job. And I was like, work at a church. And that kept it kind of vague enough.
Yeah. Maybe you take the trash out.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Who knows? We have all sorts of people work at a church. Churches need all sorts of people. So
Accounting work. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, pastor, is the most upfront answer really as to what I am.
Yeah. And how long have you been like full-time professional pastor, church worker?
Since I was ordained here at St. Luke's, actually, July 1st, 2018. I started working, though. I was installed at Trinity. So same way that I was installed here at St. Luke's for those listening. That was July 8th, 2018. So over 4 years now. I guess we're reaching near 4.5. Not quite, but near 4.5. So...
Yeah. Did you, before becoming a pastor, did you have role models, or were there people he's like, oh, I want to be a pastor like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I, as a youth here at St. Luke's, wasn't super involved in a youth group on Wednesdays. I think we had it back on Wednesdays back then. I had Boy Scouts on Wednesdays, and then I had a truck and a job, and I was interested in, girls my age who didn't go to this church. And so I was kind of everywhere that wasn't here. But I was pretty invested in being here for at least Sundays and taking that time. And part of that was I had a really good relationship with Pastor Chris Davis. He was the associate pastor for a time here, senior after a while. He was called to be the outreach pastor, ended up being the youth pastor instead, based off of something that, I don't know exactly. He tried to explain it to me once, but was a youth pastor. Good relationship with him, and that started actually through a Boy Scout, not merit badge, but like a Boy Scout extra badge you can get, like a religious community knot that you could put up, and I wanted that. So, and it required a lot of one-on-one time with a pastor or a minister of your religion, whatever your religion was. So that kind of started that relationship on a more one-on-one basis, and that continued on for a while.
Were there, when you were a youth and you're seeing Pastor Chris do it, were there certain assumptions you had about what the job is? Like, okay, as a youth, okay, I know what a pastor is or does. This, how would a 15-year-old David LaFore describe what a pastor does?
15-year-old David LaFore?
I don't know. You tell me.
15-year-old David, it was a long process for me to start thinking about wanting to be a pastor. 15 years old, I probably would have described the job as incredibly boring, because that's kind of what I thought about church.
Yeah.
Even though I wanted to be here because I thought it was good, I also thought it was really boring, and life other 6 days of the week was more exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I would have. I thought it would be a lot of studying, a lot of writing, a lot of public speaking. So kind of the things that you see as a layperson, which is what I see my pastor doing. They're writing sermons. Okay. Or preaching sermons. Okay. So they had to write. Okay. So they had to study, stuff that you could suss out. But I did know because of my one-on-one time with Chris that there was a lot of time with prayer, because I would see him not just with me, but people would call, he'd pray with them over the phone. I knew that there was a deeper aspect to it that was more relational as well.
And did that make you want to learn, like pursue it more, like the mystery of it, or was that
a little bit? So there was, I remember, weird how certain memories stick with you, but I was in a Dr. Sacco, my dentist. I was in his
All right.
office and a waiting room, and was reading a magazine, and there was a chaplain in there talking about the career of being a pastor. And he said, in his opinion, it was kind of like being the queen piece on a chessboard. You can go kind of any direction with the basics of being a pastor, in between prison chaplaincy, army chaplaincy, doing mission work, teaching at a university, working with youth, all sorts of different things that being a pastor can kind of fold into or work into. And that idea of the freedom of the job really stuck with me. My dad was an entrepreneur. I knew I didn't want to go into machining like my dad. I would have less fingers than I do right now.
It's good to know that yourself. Yeah.
But the fact that he was an entrepreneur, that he wasn't working for some much bigger corporation, was able to kind of, it was hard work, but he got to kind of set his own way in a lot of ways. And I found that aspect appealing, on top of the things I already knew about it, on top of the public speaking, which I had a natural ability, when it say like to be the best, right? But I can get up and not be afraid.
Yeah.
And complete a sentence, which was, especially at high school, that was good.
That was something I was not looking forward to about being a pastor.
No,
public speaking.
Yeah, I didn't see myself as a public speaker at all, and all through like undergrad and seminary, I never gave any talks until I sort of had to for class, and I was like, oh, I guess I could do this part of the job too. So it's interesting that. So speaking of training, different church groups, denominations, faith backgrounds equip their clergy in different ways. So I don't assume that all of our listeners know how our particular church body works. So how would you describe your road to becoming a pastor in terms of training, equipping, education?
Yeah. So, I mean, after I graduated high school, I knew that I eventually wanted to go to Concordia Seminary. Particularly, I wanted to go to the one in St. Louis. That's just where the pastors I had known here at St. Luke's had gone. So I knew that's where I wanted to go. But the step up to that is kind of a lot up to you, what you want to do. I particularly didn't know that much about Lutheranism, and I wanted to pursue knowing more about that. So I went to Concordia for undergrad. We used to have 10 Concordia universities across the country. We did at the time that I was going. I went to Concordia Portland to study theology. I ended up graduating with an interdisciplinary degree, but that didn't.
That sounds like made up. Like I couldn't stick with a program. Is that what interdisciplinary means?
I don't know.
That's what it means for most people. It's like, wow, you went to school for 4 years and you did a lot. You can't.
Good job.
You have to kind of take enough generalness. I had taken enough music and leadership classes along with my theology that I kind of just. Okay, well, I have to tell this story. You want the funny stories, right?
I just want to hear.
Yeah, this is embarrassing, but it's okay. I've gotten over the shame of it.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
A month before, no, not even that, 2 weeks before I graduated on May 4th of 2019. Yeah, 2013.
Okay.
I can't remember years at all. 2013 is when I graduated. I found out that I was 1 credit short for my theology degree. I was also scheduled to be the class speaker, so that would have been incredibly embarrassing to speak for the class and have not graduated with them.
Oh, no.
And it was my fault. Not going to get into all the details. I definitely should have had all the credits. I was really skimming it, and I took a pass-fail class, and I think I should have passed. by the way.
Okay.
If we're going to record this,
Yeah.
relitigate, I should have passed. But, I also, I knew that I signed a contract. I knew the deal. It was my fault. No one else's fault but mine.
My own fault. My own most grievous fault. Yep.
Yes, exactly. And that was a stressful few days trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I had a chance to meet with my advisor. And first I met with the guy who did the pass-fail class, and I pretty much fell on my sword before him.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, if it comes down to it, we're not going to hold you from graduating for this, like 2 percentage points in this one class. Like in the end, we're going to make it work. But I went out to my advisor, met with her, and I was like, so what's up? She's like, well, you actually took so many like extra classes throughout your time here. And with your having written a thesis, you actually qualify for an interdisciplinary degree. And I call up the seminary. He's like, do you care? They're like, we do not care at all. And I was like, oh, great.
Done.
I'm out of here. Give me the interdis. Fantastic.
Did you still speak at graduation?
I did still speak at graduation. Yeah, I was not picked because of my GPA. That is not why I was picked.
But you passed.
Hey, you know what? I passed. I will say my GPA got better throughout seminary. I really should have taken some time after high school to do anything else but school.
Yeah.
Would have been ideal.
A gap several years.
I needed a gap several years because now, like, by the time I graduated seminary, it's like, yeah, school's great. It's easy. I know what, it's not easy, but I know what I'm doing. I have a system. It's good.
So you got an undergraduate degree.
Yep, undergraduate
in
degree.
life. And then you went to seminary, which is a graduate program.
Yeah, and the seminary in the Missouri Synod, that's generally 2 years of classroom education, followed by a vicarage year, which is essentially an internship. Mine was in North Dakota. Minot, North Dakota. I specifically asked to be near a coast. Minot, North Dakota is an hour away from the geographic center of the North American continent.
I love it.
So literally as far from a coast as possible while remaining in North America. So that was, I took a picture of me at that center point, which, by the way, there's a Anytime Fitness there at the center of the continent, in case you're curious, in a Mexican restaurant.
It's good to know.
And then
our
you
vicarage,
return.
we said we wanted to go to a coast either.
Yeah.
Large city, either coast. And we went to Midwest City, Oklahoma. It was called Midwest City. The name
That's
of the city was called
fantastic.
Midwest City.
That's awesome.
So I'm feeling it. Yeah.
So you get it. Yeah. It was a good experience. It's a great experience. And I actually fell in love with North Dakota after that. And with the church I was serving there. And then come back for a additional year of schooling after that, before graduation. I ended up doing 3 years before vicarage. I did not come in with my languages done.
And by languages, you mean what?
Greek and Hebrew. So if you don't come in with Greek and Hebrew into the seminary program, you got to take Greek and Hebrew there. It doesn't count towards your credits. It's
just a prerequisite.
It's a prereq. I did not want to take summer courses to graduate in 4 years. I wanted to continue working at Lutherwood, which was a camp in Oregon that I worked at. I felt that was better for my ministry experience and formation, was to continue working with young adults and with youth to actively work in a mission field, in a gospel-centered mission field, rather than just take more classes over the summer. I also knew it would reconnect me with reality and get me out of the academic world just a little bit. So yeah, I thought it was, and honestly, it was like, give me another year to just grow and mature and have more life experience before you put me in a church.
Yeah.
Like, let's not be reckless here. Give me some time.
I wonder what people think about, or what assumptions they have when they think about a seminary. Because I realize I'm very ignorant on most every profession besides my own. So I listener, you can comment below or, send us an email. But my assumption is that many people assume when you go to seminary, you take classes on all the books of the Bible, like a Bible college where like a Bible study fellowship, where you learn the content of the Bible or the books of the Bible. I don't know what I expected seminary to be, but how would you describe the actual content, curriculum? What did you actually do for your training?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's not that. In fact, there's some great biblical teachers at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. And sometimes you really get some some great gems, but other days you are cruising through. You have to kind of take, here's a few Old Testament classes, here's a few New Testament classes, but there's so much material, and when it comes to exegetical, so exegetical being pretty much study of the scripture,
like how to read and interpret.
It was, let's rather deep dive and learn how to learn reading the Bible, learn how to get into a passage, to take time to ask questions. So you're not getting every answer that you would about the Bible. Instead, you're let's take Exodus chapter 14. And okay, I've just throwing that off the top of my head.
All right. I was just trying to put it together. It's before the 10 Commandments. It's after Passover.
Yeah.
So they're teaching you to properly interpret it for yourself, or teaching you to look at it for yourself instead of saying, this is what it says and this is what it means, or say, look at this, but look at it with this approach, or I don't know.
I think that's what that we're really trying to get at, and the more helpful professors really focused on. Like, I can't teach you about every single psalm in the Bible, but I can teach you some themes and some structures and some, all that. And that's only a part of the seminary curriculum. I mean, the Bible is a significant part, but you also have systematic theology. So that's kind of like, as I think Professor Joel Bierman put it, that's kind of like a confirmation class on steroids, where you're going through, instead of reading just a biblical text, you're going through topically, what does the Bible and our theology and history say? Then you have the history of the church, which I was very interested in. And then you also have the practical department. How do you write a sermon? Where do you even begin? Because a sermon's not just a public speaking event. There's, especially in Lutheranism, or at least in our tradition, there is a very particular idea of what sort of speaking a sermon is. Rather than just, you have to be good at talking in front of crowds. That helps.
Or giving a lecture.
Or giving even a Bible study.
So in your time at the seminary, was there what was your kind of favorite part of it looking back? Like, was there a specific class, or was the relationships I made along, or I don't know,
That's a good question. That's a good question. I would say it was my 5th year, so my final year there. Tuesday nights.
Did you take a 5th year to fit in the language and all? Okay.
Yeah. So took 3 years, then I went on my vicarage, and then I did my return year.
Gotcha.
5th year was interesting for a lot of reasons, but one of the really interesting and most valued parts I have was Tuesday nights. We didn't have class on Wednesday with the new schedule, essentially. You'd rarely ever have a class on Wednesday. You have a big church service. I went and worked at my fieldwork church, actually with a guy your fieldwork church, Chapel of the Cross.
So in addition to classroom learning and your year-long apprenticeship, internship, you have sort of on-the-job training throughout the 4 or 5 years where you're assigned to a local church to help out in small, sometimes significant ways.
Yeah, Mark Hayner says hi, by the way. I was talking to him just a couple weeks ago.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Aaron.
So Tuesday nights we kind of took for social time at the seminary. So we met in the academic quad, which is I don't know how to really describe it.
Every university has a quad. People get the quad. Big grass field surrounded by old buildings.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I hope this is all appropriate to say, but we'd meet out there with cigars, with whiskey, and then usually a professor or two would show up. Usually there was Professor David Lewis would show up, but we invited various professors or not just always professors. Dale Meyer, president of the seminary, would come, and we would just talk and ask about theology, ask about church experiences. What we were really curious about is, tell us what your experiences have been. It was kind of like this, a loose form conversation, really, but with less planned points. But I really valued that, the community, the checking in with each other, the learning things that aren't necessarily going to be taught in a lecture or a classroom, just gaining experience from other folks, and also building camaraderie with these guys I'm about to graduate with and to go into ministry with. because of that, I still keep in touch with most of these same people. Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know how to ask this next question well, so let me stumble for a minute, if you'd be gracious. While I'm stumbling, please, gentlemen, help yourself to candy corn. We still have a little bit on the table here.
A little bit.
So think about vocations, whether it's paid professional like in a job, or a father or a mother, or a volunteer coordinator in a community. I think people on the outside usually have a certain perspective of what that job, calling, vocation is, and then people who are doing it probably have a different perspective. So think about motherhood for a second. Most of us grew up around mothers. Many of us grew up around mothers, have mothers, seen mothers in action. And, I could look at my mom doing her thing and make certain assumptions about what a mom is or what a mother is. But my guess is if I asked her to tell me what does the calling of mom mean to her, she'd probably say it very differently than what I would describe. Mm-hmm. So like as a young boy, I would say, oh, moms, they cook and they do the laundry and they help take care of us when dad's at work, or like something, and they make peace because we're fighting all the time. That's probably what I would have said, something like that. But, living with my wife now, who is the mother of our 3 children, she'd probably have a much better answer. I'll let Charlotte speak for herself sometime. But, something like she's shaping our children and nurturing them, and passing on values, whatever it might be. And so my guess is like with pastor, like any other job, somebody on the outside could look at that and have certain oh, I know what a doctor is or a lawyer is or a school teacher. But if you ask the doctor, lawyer, or school teacher, what is your job? Not like what do you do on a daily basis or what are the tasks for a week, but in a little bit more abstract, what is the end or the goal or the big picture that in your vocation you're laboring towards? I don't know how to say that more concisely, but run with whatever you heard in there.
Well, I'll start small and maybe build on that a little bit. But I remember Professor Bierman saying that, but the pastor, he's the absolution man. It's almost like you can, like Superman, take off the pastoral robe, and under there's a big A, big red A. He's the absolution man, and I think,
what do you mean by absolution?
So absolution, that is the complete forgiveness, wiping clean, of sin, of the soul, of the renewing of the spirit, the new life. It's the receiving of the good news of the gospel, because the gospel is about what's good, but this is the actual receiving of that, what God is actually doing and changing us, and changing our situation. But I think that's part of it. Absolution. It really, to me, it's more about what are the good gifts of God that I, as a pastor, have been entrusted by the church and called by God to give. That means that takes a lot of different ways of it happening. So in a church service, it would be the moment that, we had it this Sunday. I now, as a called and ordained servant of Christ, and by his authority, I therefore forgive you all of your sins. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. That is a moment of absolution, and that's a particular moment of the pastor being called to do that in a public sense. By public, I mean in front of big room or a small room of people or whatever, but I'm doing that in a general way in the public. But that also means I've had private confession and absolution. It also means the consecrating and the giving of the sacraments of of course, Holy Communion, the waters of baptism. It also means proclaiming that good news and forgiveness in the words of a sermon. So essentially, I'm God's chosen. And this I'm not trying to get all high up on my horse. Really, I'm not. In fact, it's a lot of what you said. It's not about my skill set. It's not about my charisma. Yeah. It's not about my Bible knowledge. I am just simply a man chosen to give the good gifts of God to God's people. Now, of course, we all kind of have that duty as Christians, but there's a particular way in which this public office that the church chooses, that this is the person that we are entrusting to do this, is significant. And that's both way more expansive than I think a lot of people think about the pastoral role, and it's also way less expansive because I am not, the event organizer. I am not the world's best lecturer or Bible teacher. In fact, I may get things wrong. I have been corrected before, once during a sermon, whatever. You just kind of roll with it. It's funny. It was actually on Gideon. I got which guys got sent home and which ones.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot which water thing it was. Sure. I'm mentioning that. Sorry for the folks in the podcast.
We had chapel this morning. I got to teach, 80 children about Gideon the judge and his battle.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a church administrator, nor am I a guy who's really good at running nonprofits. There's a lot of things that I'm not, that I hope that I have some of these skills because they work really well in the church and in a leadership position. But I'm not even a staff organizer or whatever. I'm simply the guy that God has chosen through the church to give good gifts, the good gifts that God has to give. That being mostly the forgiveness of sins and the new life. And yeah.
I liked how you said, absolution man, is that what you said?
Yeah.
And I was going to kind of relate it to the word messenger because, like the cliche, like don't kill the messenger. Like a messenger is bringing a message on behalf of another. But I think it's more than that. Like you're not, as you talked about absolution or like forgiveness and things like that. I don't know how you'd say this in your own words, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what I heard you saying is it's more than just telling people about forgiveness. Mm-hmm. You're not just delivering a message sort of about what Jesus did. You're doing something on his behalf in the moment.
Yeah. So this is it's interesting as I've been putting books away in my office for the past 2 days. One of them came up, and it's a book I still somewhat have mixed feelings about, but it really did change my view on what I was getting into my first year of seminary, and it was I think it's the preaching is for proclamation.
Theology is for proclamation.
Gerhard Forty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea that I am not describing to you, Shane. Mm-hmm. Well, just pretend you've sinned.
Okay.
At some point in
Done.
your life. Okay.
Terrible. I am a poor, miserable sinner.
I'm not describing to you how Jesus forgives your sins. So often that is part of my job.
Not only describing, at least.
Yeah, that will be part of my job, but that's not really the thing. Mm-hmm. The thing is, I am here. God is speaking through me. Jesus is speaking through me. Your sins are forgiven. It's happening in this moment. In the same way that a couple becomes married when the pastor says, I now pronounce you man and wife, in the same way that reality can happen in a courtroom based off of the words of a judge. But this is even bigger. And it's not my power. And it's like very clear. This is Jesus. This is God. This is the work of the saving Trinity on our behalf. But God is doing this thing. It is an active thing that's happening. It's not just a description. And if we fall short at just describing, then we've fallen short of our duty. Though the description, again, it needs to happen. People need to learn and teach and all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other analogies that would resonate with this. So again, think about my family. I could talk like about my wife and what I love about her, but that's different than saying I love you.
Yeah.
Like there's something present and active. I think theologians would use the words primary discourse, like that first to second person, as opposed to talking about a third person.
Yeah.
I don't know, Shane. How is this like super weird and abstract and random? How?
No, I mean I have the benefit of a doubt, kind of growing up in the church and working at the church still, so nothing is like crazy foreign to me. But I love the simplicity that you said. It's just like absolution, man. Like at the bare bones of it, at the end of the day, like primary thing, like one thing you can say that you do. It's just like absolution, or like the things that are. I don't know. Yeah, I'm terrible at describing, but like. Right. Yeah, I like that you put it in its kind of simplest form, but it's still like from an outside, if you're like an unchurched person, that I'm sure that still is like a foreign concept too.
And even if you're a church person, coming
true.
into like seminary and taking the Lutheran mind classes, which is where we read that Ferdy book, and like, oh, this is different, and it's important that distinction is taught as seminary because, in the end, as I've shared with you earlier, we're not taught how to administrate. We're not taught. We get a little bit experience teaching classes and we get some experience preaching sermons. So it's crazy when I look back on it. They let me graduate seminary. I'd preach like maybe less than 10 sermons.
Oh, for sure.
And that was more than a lot of my.
You probably had 5 that were required.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when you think of vicarage, I was preaching much more in vicarage, but in terms of the actual classroom experience, and some of those I just wrote and they were read and got a grade. It was like, I didn't even.
You didn't even get to speak.
I got graded on grammar and sermons.
Yeah. Thanks, Rev Rosso.
That was, he gave me an A despite my grammar once, which is like, man, I must have wrote something really, really better here than usual. So,
okay. So absolution, man, that's abstract. And I think it's beautiful. I think I've heard it described other ways as like delivering the goods.
Yeah.
Like you got to talk maybe about a variety of things, but at the end of the day, the heart of what you want to do as a pastor is bring the goods, deliver not just the message, but the efficacious or the effectual word of God, the word of God that does the thing.
It's effective.
Yeah, whether it's convicting or restoring, you want to be the instrument that God has called you to be to do that work, that ultimately forgiving work, but sometimes there's some correcting that has to be done first. So if that's like the end game, what do you actually do? Like, what does a pastor do? There's the joke that you just work on Sundays. I know it's different at each calling, but how would you describe to a random listener, not every pastor, but in general, at least a pastor in our kind of Lutheran tradition, here's what a pastor spends his time doing.
Well, if I had to take this week as an example, mostly a pastor moves boxes with books into a room and then throws some away. Not throw away. I don't know what's going to happen to them. It's an exciting fate.
Recycle and repurpose.
Bonfire. Who knows? Well, I probably shouldn't start burning books. It sounded really bad.
Shane will edit that out later.
Let's scrub that one.
So what does a pastor do?
This is a great question I asked myself when I sat in my office during my first call on the first day after my installation. And throughout a week, I'll be doing anything from, I'll just kind of go through the main things. So on the first priority level, you got to get ready for Sunday on some level. So that means, getting a sermon, whatever that exactly means.
What do you download them?
Well,
Google.
Let's just say Dan posts a lot of sermon helps on online, and I give a lot of credit to you. But no, usually it's getting a sermon. So and I'm using that term intentionally because sometimes it feels like I'm writing a sermon. Sometimes it feels like it's just going to be in my head, and I don't actually write that much down. On some weeks I'd write out a whole 6-page transcript. Mm-hmm. On other weeks I'd go up with a Post-it note. Yep. Because I thought of the sermon in the car on my way to the gym. And so I'm getting a sermon.
So preparing for the proclamation.
Yeah, preparing for the proclamation, I suppose. That's probably a better way to put it.
Getting a sermon.
It sounds like I'm stealing it. Like
I'm acquiring
found somebody else's sermon.
Just change a few things here and there so the teacher doesn't notice. And here we go. Yeah, no, that's not quite. Preparing a sermon. That's probably the best way to put it. Mm-hmm. Preparing a Bible study, if that's generally something that you're doing on a weekly basis. So preparing a Bible study. Some of those can be a little bit more, what I would call, or a lot of people would call canned. Usually I didn't want them though, because for me, the benefit was in studying for the Bible study. There was a great benefit there. So preparing a Bible study of some sort. And planning out on a small church, and most pastors in Missouri Synod, small churches, not often rural, but usually smaller. Mm-hmm. So it means picking out hymns in my old case and looking over the readings, praying over the readings. That's all kind of the office stuff to prepare for a Sunday. Sometimes you have more particular stuff like voters meetings or elders meetings. those things you got to prepare to throughout the week. Sometimes preparing a devotion or a prayer. Sometimes getting just like, what's an agenda? What do we need to talk about? And then there's the pastoral care stuff. There's the visitation of the homebound. So, or however we call them, homestays, or not homestays. That's not a term. It's like when I stay at someone else's home. It's good. Homestay. Well, you know,
Visiting
people who aren't able to make it to church.
people who aren't making it to church and bringing them the goods.
Yeah.
So bringing them, usually I'd come and I'd bring them, well, we just talk for like an hour, just talk about whatever, talk about what they've done, talk about their family, talk about, you know, sometimes I show them my photos from my recent backpacking trip or fishing. They often like that. I liked it too. You know, we talk about like, oh, bears. Oh yeah, I saw a bear once. So it's usually just conversation.
Yeah.
But then bringing out a text, usually the text I was going to be preaching on that week, because the more I just work through it in my mind, in praying and sometimes talking with these people, they'd say something. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna write that down. You mind if I go ahead and take that from you? I don't know. You know, God has a lot of wisdom that he puts in the saints of the church. And so going and visiting, then giving communion as well. So that was another thing that we would do for the homebound, give communion. I also found I needed to spend a little bit of the time in the week just volunteering in the community in something completely unrelated to my job.
Yeah.
So in Oregon, I did two things. I kind of pared down to one once my schedule became busier. But I did a food bank, or food pantry, which didn't really fill my heart, but I knew it was good work to do and it needed to happen. And doing that through COVID was interesting. Kind of seeing the change, and literally every week you come in, things would be different. But then also I did one, it was still volunteering, but it was more for my personal pleasure. And that was volunteering at a botanical garden, which we had in Silverton. And it was a lot of weeding, which is not as much fun, but some of the older ladies I was working with, oh man, they were a blast. Yeah. I'll tell you what. And they loved having like a 20-something, 30-something-year-old man like, oh, cool, you can move all the concrete now. I was like, well, all right. Okay. Well, let's not pretend I'm super strong. But that's where I learned a lot about taking care of a garden and pruning rose bushes and, what things are blooming and when. And so it was just kind of cool learning about God's creation, working out there and just doing something that was something beautiful in our community. I got a lot more joy out of it, though, maybe, I don't know. Things need to be weeded. It's a vocation. It needed to happen. Yep. So, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else major that I missed. Prayer. Oh boy. Yeah. Sometimes I was really good about it, getting in, and I'd often just sing through matins on my own, in the sanctuary. And I found that just focused me, reading through the Psalms, sometimes just praying off the cuff. Some days I was excellent at it. I was a really good Christian. Other days I was a Christian in real need of the gospel. Yeah. Because I was not doing or taking care of myself to be a shepherd as well. So yeah, there's that prayer and Bible study. Yeah.
What are Shane? I keep jumping into.
No, I'm more than anything just listening intently. Yeah.
So I think every calling. Again, I mean calling in a broad way. So whether it's professional, it's volunteering, it's a relational calling. I think every calling has unique challenges. As a parent, I don't do well with vomit or diarrhea. Like I lose it. Like I'm not good. If one of our kids has one of those things, I take the others and I'm like, Charlotte, there's a clean up an aisle 2. We're gonna be out here in the yard. Like I'll take them. Like that's a hard. Like somebody who isn't a parent maybe doesn't think about. Oh yeah, like there are terribly gross things about being a parent. Every job has really hard things. What are some of the unique hard things? I don't want to give you. There's all kinds of categories, but. I know I have some as a pastor that that's a burden. Like this is a really difficult. Some are just hard to do, but some are really tolling, like emotionally, spiritually. Like this is a difficult cross to bear in this job.
Yeah, I have a more specific one than a more general one. The more specific one is just when there is conflict in the church, leading the church and leading God's people and yourself through that. There was times that, like, and even like as I'm an outside observer, but I see something is turning into a conflict, and I have to step in and just, because I'm caring for people, and I'm trying not to like triangulate or take over or pick winners or whatever. That's not my goal.
Yeah.
My goal is like, hey, let's maybe talk well with each other. Let's communicate well with each other. My goal is not to sit here and say who's right or who's wrong. Though sometimes that may be very clear and obvious. Other times I found it wasn't so clear and obvious. But walking into a room and personally being like, there's a conflict. I'm going to say it, that there is one. We need to deal with that. The hardest part about being a pastor for me, though, it's less to do with any specific task and more to do with just something that is being a pastor. And I think it's very familiar with, I've never been a parent, but I imagine this is similar. When you screw up as a pastor, it's really hard to like get over that, because it's like, this is important to people. People's faiths are wrapped up in my job. And even though I could say, well, I'm imperfect, and I know that theologically, I know that I'm imperfect, that Jesus is the real pastor. Jesus is the care of their souls. But when I screw up, it's hard for me not to think that the consequences are just on me, and that they're going to have temporal and possibly even eternal consequences. And getting over guilt of when I know I did not do as I should.
Yeah.
Whatever that means doing a lack of something, dropping the ball on a visit for a time, right? And not seeing somebody, or making a call to change a program without having gone through really the proper way. I'm trying to be general here, but these are real experiences I've had. And then getting the pushback and feeling awful for it, and having to I've really had to learn the gospel for myself. Like I've been, that was the big thing, especially my first couple of years of ministry, is learning that like I really need to preach this gospel to myself when I get up there on a Sunday.
Which in a certain way you can't. Like I think that even just our theology, that it comes from outside of us, and we, the word of the gospel from outside of us is always stronger than the word inside of us. Like we can't. So that's for me one of my challenges is
Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Wow, okay, is that he said that?
Yeah, you did.
Poorly quoted, but like. I miss having a pastor. Like that's the hardest thing about me. For one of the things about being a pastor is I don't have a pastor.
No.
And having an associate, I think is part of that.
Yeah. I'd call my friends, and I don't mind naming one of them, but Pastor Tyson Bentz, he's a friend of mine from seminary, works out in Michigan. I call him. He's like, I need forgiveness for this. And as you said, and I think I'm going to butcher the quote too, or maybe you weren't specifically quoting him. Maybe it's just the concept, but Dietrich Bonhoeffer saying that the word of God is more powerful in the mouth of my brother than it is in my own heart.
Yeah.
And that to me is potently strong.
Yeah.
I need to hear forgiveness from the outside, but it's hard when you're on your own and you're the absolution man. And then you screw up.
Because I don't want to, again, I'll share some of my own experiences. My one observation is that the people of God that you're called to serve, forgiveness and love and absolution is not typically what they're emailing you with or talking to you about after church. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of good experiences that I've had with that, with people of the church being gracious to me and feeling and knowing that. But there's also, there's been some harder experiences where, in some ways it almost feels like I'm working customer service and that can, honestly though, some of the harshest words I ever got as a pastor were from outside the church, as well, which both hurt, but also was like interesting. So, if that's what you're talking about, and sometimes taking flack, which is part of the job as well. I mean, I love serving God's people, but as I think we all know, if you've ever met another person who's not you, sometimes things don't go exactly as you could always wish.
Yeah. Yeah. What about some of the joys for you, or kind of unique blessings? Kind of a churchy word, but like, what do you, anything stand out of like, all right, yeah, there's heartache and there's challenges, but I love this about this calling?
I won't name him. I had one homebound that I visited frequently who was at this point in his life, just, I think by a lot of circumstance, a bit of a loner. It kind of happens later on in life for some folks, unfortunately, who had a lot of time to reflect on his life and was not pleased with what he saw in the mirror. Was very convinced that, heaven and hell are real, God is real, but I'm not going to heaven. I don't deserve it. And I could sit there and I could explain to him all the ways which the Bible says that sins are forgiven. And he'd go, yeah, but mine? Yeah, but mine. And I was like, okay, but like some of these people were pretty awful and their sins are forgiven. Yeah, but mine. Okay. And then finally, just like, okay, I guess I'm done. I can't convince you. I can't convince you. By the way, here is the body of Jesus Christ. Here is the blood of Jesus Christ. Will you believe him? Because he says that when he gives you these things, your sins are forgiven. You don't have to believe me. I'm just bringing this for him. And seeing that, like actually seeing in the face and in the shoulders, a change of expression in him going, now, I wish I could say that one and done, right? Then he really got it after that. It never again.
All fixed.
And just like us, right? And just like us too, where I know I'm forgiven and yet I sin and then I feel guilty and I figure I have to keep heaping the guilt upon myself to somehow make things equal. But every time I got to visit this guy, I got to do something effective in that moment. I was privileged by God to be in the room to deliver the goods and to give the absolution. And that's amazing. And that's not like anything else in any job in this world. I mean, that's the sort of life-changing, eternity-changing stuff that you get to see. So yeah, if I had to pick one particular thing, there's so many blessings in the job. If I had to pick one particular thing, it's when the gospel, despite everything else, gets through and you get to watch it happen. It kind of reminds me, it's very loosely connected, but there's a joke when there's a British TV and this gal's talking to this Catholic priest and she's like, are you a normal person? He's like, well, I consider myself a normal person, but why would you maybe not think I am? And she's like, well, you believe in God for starters. That's not normal. And then at that moment, painting falls off the wall, and the priest is like, oh man, I love it when he does that. And I do. I love it when I get to see God do something and I'm just kind of there and like, wow, yeah, he did that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh.
Which is
cool.
One of the burdens in the ministry is that there is no such promise.
Yeah. And that's the thing. There isn't a promise that you're not always going to see it, but sometimes you're privileged too.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
It's so cool.
Yeah. Pastor David, thanks for kicking off the series.
Yeah.
If I could put you on the spot, and I don't want to alienate anybody who you're not going to pick here, but if you got to pick a profession or vocation for our next guest, I don't know if we're going to be able to or not. Is there a vocation, profession that you bumped into people and you're like, I'd love to hear this calling's answers to some of these kinds of questions?
It's been on my mind a lot lately, and I've had the privilege to be in this community the last 4 years of my life, but I really find farmers fascinating, especially if, family farmers who like, yeah, I just grew up in this job. It's like, did you ever maybe consider that you like farming? I farm. My family farms. That's what we do. It's
Yeah.
and there's something just, I don't know, interesting about that. So yeah, farming.
All right, Shane.
So interesting.
Do you have any specific vocations, callings you'd like for us to try to dig into?
No, I'd have to really. I really got to sit on that.
That's fair.
Sit in that.
I think most of us. Well, I'll speak for myself. I don't think I know what 1% of the options are for jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, like, even to say farmer, like,
What does that mean?
You know,
Yeah.
wheat versus apples versus oranges versus, sunflower seeds. These are worlds apart. Like, there's going to be some overlap, but just in the world of farming, I don't think I know what 1% of the options are.
I did think of one actually. I'm always fascinated, and I think I always want to ask questions, but never have the time to. But for people who are stay at home or like have kids, so like, they take care of their family and their home first, like to dive into the kind of that vocation, like, because I think people associate job and vocation, and but like you were saying, like, is your vocation a sibling, a parent, or a child, or a student, or whatever? But like somebody, like maybe is a mother, a stay-at-home mother who takes care of their family, the house, but like what all goes into that? What do they see in it, dude? Like, I don't know. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I'd like to get somebody who works for like the forest department or national park or state park, somebody who helps kind of manage these giant, in a certain sense, public spaces that are nature, but, maintained. I don't know. I think that'd be fascinating.
You even have like private timber management companies as well.
Yeah.
Which I want to hear their spookiest stories though. So, that's what I want to hear. That's what I'll ask.
I second that. I want to know.
Yeah.
Well, if you play your cards right, Pastor David, we might invite you back. You could
excellent.
at least listen quietly to the conversation.
Tell me a spooky story.
Who gave this man a mic?
Pastor David in the corner.
We'll take care of that at the next commercial break. All right. Well, Shane, thanks as always. Pastor David, welcome. Thanks for being here. Look forward to serving alongside you and delivering the goods and receiving them from you.
Thank you, Pastor Dan.
This is a good
Being
time.
able to speak well.
Well, every now and then when I'm not chewing candy corn in the background.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thanks, listeners. Thanks, viewers. We'll catch you next time. That's it for today. And stay tuned for more vocations as we see how God's at work through people in our world.
Yeah.
That's the end of the episode, but we want to continue the conversation. Continue the conversation by sharing this episode, subscribing, or leaving a review. Connect with us on Instagram at 2414 Podcast. Connect with us through email at 2414@stlukes-church.com. Or best of all, keep the conversation going by inviting someone to process with you so that you can each walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. If you happen to be in the Seattle-Tacoma area of Washington, stop by on a Sunday morning and say hi. 2414 is a podcast produced by St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Federal Way, Washington. To find more content, discover upcoming opportunities to connect in person, or to support the show, head on over to stlukes-church.com. Thanks for walking with us.